Buy you furs and diamond bracelets, make you look just like a queen. The promised land, and I'll be there someday if you...
What if I told you that some of the most iconic bands of the 60s have all but vanished from music history? Today, we're unearthing the sounds of forgotten legends that once ruled the airwaves. Number 20, the Chambers Brothers. Think you know all the iconic sounds of the 60s? Think again. Want proof of how sonically eclectic the 60s were? Look no further than this psychedelic soul band from Mississippi and their 11-minute instrumental of Time Has Come Today, the single version of which hit number 11 on the Billboard 100. The Chambers Brothers, who actually were all brothers, got their start singing at their local Baptist church in Lee County, Mississippi. In 1952, George Chambers, the oldest brother, returned from a hitch in the army and decided to leave Mississippi for Los Angeles, and his three brothers soon joined him. They began building a following in the folk and gospel music circles in Southern California. In 1967, Columbia Records signed them to a contract and they came out with their biggest hit, the psychedelic classic Time Has Come Today, which rose to number 11 on the Billboard charts. They released a few other singles, but few of them even made the top 100. The group disbanded in 1972. 2 years later, they reunited to record the album Unbonded, but it didn't do particularly well either. They did continue to tour, however, and backed up Maria Moldauer on her Gospel Nights album, and even sang the jingle for a TV commercial for Levi's jeans. Number 19, Paul Revere and the Raiders. What do you get when you mix history with rock? Something unforgettable. Could an organ-based band from Idaho performing in Revolutionary War era garb really be a chart-topping juggernaut? Well, yes. With 4 top 10 hits, including Good Thing, which was prominently featured in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Raiders could be found strutting their period-specific threads everywhere from Dick Clark to the Batman series. Formed in Boise, Idaho in 1959 by Mark Lindsay and Paul Revere, the group started off as a high-energy garage band that was playing frat parties and college dances in the Midwest. In 1962, the group was given a little song called Louie Louie and recorded it. However, the Kingsmen released a version of the song at the same time, and it was their version that became the hit. Number 18, the Amboy Dukes. From garage bands to psychedelic legends, this group had it all. Few would call Ted Nugent a hippie. He is a pro-gun hunting enthusiast who has said no to drugs and alcohol his entire life, after all. But the Nuge first found success as the lead guitarist in this Detroit-based psychedelic band all the same. Though maybe not a household name, Nugent remained proud of his work with the band, whose second studio album, Journey to the Center of Your Mind, had some chart success in 1968 and had this to say at a 2009 reunion. Everyone knows the Amboy Dukes are the ultimate garage band on the planet Earth. The band was formed by Ted Nugent, who was born in Detroit and had been playing in local rock bands since age 12. They soon became one of the premier bands in the Detroit area. In 1968, they recorded an album, Journey to the Center of the Mind, for the Detroit label Mainstream Records. The title song, with music written by Nugent and lyrics written by band member Steve Farmer, was released as a single and soon reached number 16 on the national pop charts. Unfortunately, their follow-up albums, Migration and Marriage on the Rocks, were nowhere as big as their debut album. After the failure of their last album in 1971, Survival of the Fittest, Nugent disbanded the group. Number 17, The Seekers.
Hey there, Georgie girl, swinging down the street so fancy-free. By my side, when I walk through the storm, you'll be mine.
How did a folk quartet from Down Under become global superstars? This Aussie folk quartet sounded more like an odd 50s aftermath than a 60s mega band, but their unlikely rendition of their homeland's ballad, Waltzing Matilda, helped cement them as a giant band of the era that would eventually sell 50 million records.
Hey there, Georgie girl, dreaming of the someone you could be. Life is a reality.
The Seekers were the first Australian pop music group to achieve major chart and sales success in the United Kingdom and the United States. They were especially popular during the 1960s, with their best-known configuration of Judith Durham on vocals, piano, and tambourine, Athol Guy on double bass and vocals, Keith Potker on 12-string guitar, banjo, and vocals, and Bruce Woodley on guitar, mandolin, banjo, and vocals.
Shout of victory, you will hear the shout of victory, and never mind at all, but if I...
In 1967, they were named as Joint Australians of the Year, the only group thus honored. In July 1968, Durham left to pursue a solo career, and the group disbanded. Number 16, Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. Costume acts today are one thing, but back then, it was daring. Frontman Domingo Samudio's costume act would never fly today, yet the band's biggest hit still plays. Wooly Bully spent 18 weeks on the Billboard 100 and today is as synonymous with classic good time garage rock as any other party hit on this list. Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs were a 60s Tex-Mex rock and roll band. The group was formed by lead singer Domingo Sam Samudio in 1961 in Dallas, Texas, USA. The other original members were Carl Medke, Russell Fowler, Omar Big Man Lopez, and Vincent Lopez. The original lineup only recorded one record which failed to sell. They broke up in late 1962. Samudio went on to become an organist for the rock group Andy and the Night Riders. Samudio resurrected the Pharaohs in 1963. They made their debut with the novelty number Haunted House and signed up with the MGM music label. The follow-up songs Juju Hand and Ring Dang Do were minor chart successes. The band scored their greatest smash hit with the wonderfully raucous Wooly Bully. Number 15, Barry Sadler.
Work, right? No, not entirely. We are trained in commando operations, but also we work with native peoples training troops.
Up on their chests, these are men,
Of brave men of the green boots.
From the battlefield to the recording studio, this man did it all. Though not technically a band, Sergeant Barry Sadler is too enigmatic an artist not to mention on this list. A decorated Army and Air Force veteran, his Ballad of the Green Berets was a tribute to his fellow Special Forces fighters at the peak of the peace craze. The song hit number 1 while he was still enlisted and would sell some 9 million copies. Stranger still was Sadler's post-military and music career, a pulp novelist in Guatemala.
Of America's best, he'll be a man.
Sadler picked up the guitar again during his time in the Air Force and joined a short-lived trio after his discharge. He began composing a song about the Green Berets during his Special Forces medic training. With the help of Special Forces Lieutenant Jerry Gittell, Sadler signed a songwriter's contract with a New York music company in July 1964. He worked on the Green Beret song in Vietnam and after recuperating from his wounds at Fort Bragg. Number 14, Jan and Dean.
As a pretty little flower bed of white gardenias.
They weren't just Beach Boys, they were the original Surf Kings. Jan and Dean were two Beach Boys from Los Angeles whose surf and doo-wop driven hits, including Dead Man's Curve and the number 1 Surf City, made them as essential to that genre as, well, the actual Beach Boys. It's almost too easy to underestimate the importance of Jan and Dean in the history of rock and roll and its evolution into rock. The mere mention of their name today evokes images of suntanned California teens dancing and surfing on the beaches of Malibu. The ultimate good time music act of the early 60s, who only earned 1 gold record for Surf City, the duo gets credit for inspiring lots of smiles and providing the soundtrack to countless parties. But few listeners, critics, or pop culture historians appreciate just how important they were musically during the first half of the 1960s, or how long it took them to achieve the level of craftsmanship that characterized their music as much as their high harmonies and catchy choruses. By 1965, Jan and Dean's chart successes had slackened somewhat. They still placed records in the top 30 and tried jumping on several pop culture bandwagons, including albums devoted to folk rock and the singles and albums hooked on the craze surrounding the then new Batman television series. Number 13, the Marcels. Ever heard a classic tune transformed into something unforgettable? This group did just that. Even in an era where being unique was the name of the game in the music business, the Marcels stood out from other groups. Racially diverse and trained on 50s doo-wop, the Pittsburgh-based band hit with a decidedly not of the times take on Blue Moon, a song previously covered by, among others, Elvis Presley, which went number 1 in 1961. One of the best vocal groups of all time, the Marcels produced more good recordings in their tragically short career than many groups did in their long careers. The Marcels were an R&B group that formed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1959. Unusual for the time was the fact that it was a racially integrated group, 2 of its members being white and 3 black. Now I'm no longer alone, without a dream in my heart. The group had its biggest hit with the 1961 doo-wop classic Blue Moon, originally written for the 1930 film Manhattan Melodrama, but with a decidedly up-tempo doo-wop style. It sold more than 1 million copies, earned the group a gold record, and became such a classic that it is featured in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. They had further hits, though not on the scale of Blue Moon, with Heartaches, number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and the catchy novelty song Friendly Loan. Number 12, The Searchers.
Everybody stops praying and get down on my knees and pray that they go away, but still they...
You might not know their name, but you've definitely heard their hits. Another massively successful band you've heard but not heard of, The Searchers rose from Liverpool's skiffle ashes and helped lead the British invasion with hits like Hippie Hippie Shake and Love Potion No. 9. A 2019 tour finally retired the band, which lives on somewhat via Facebook.
Never ever known a girl so lovely, sweet enough to want to eat.
The Searchers are an English mercy beat group who emerged during the British invasion of the 1960s. The band's hits include a remake of the Drifters' 1961 hit Sweets for My Sweet, Sugar and Spice, written by their producer Tony Hatch, remakes of Jackie DeShannon's Needles and Pins and When You Walk in the Room, a cover of the Orlons' Don't Throw Your Love Away, and a cover of the Clovers' Love Potion No. 9. With the Swinging Blue Jeans, the Searchers tied for being the second group from Liverpool after the Beatles to have a hit in the US when their Needles and Pins and the Swinging Blue Jeans' Hippie Hippie Shake both reached the Hot 100 on March 7th, 1964. Number 11, Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Spin to drop all your troubles by the riverside.
Imagine a band so experimental they redefined the sound of a generation. This experimental Canadian collective had a revolving door of members that included players from, among other bands, The Blues Project and Frank Zappa's The Mothers of Invention. The experiment worked, and the group's second album, 1968's eponymously named Blood, Sweat, and Tears, won the Grammy for Album of the Year. The following decade saw as much success, but the group hasn't released a studio record since 1980. BS&T has gone through numerous iterations with varying personnel and has encompassed a wide range of musical styles. Their sound has merged rock, pop, and R&B soul music with big band jazz. Number 10, Hermans Hermits.
Buy you furs and diamond bracelets, make you look just like a queen. Very carefully, closer now, and you will see what I mean.
What happens when a British invasion band flies under the radar? With 7 albums, 3 films, and 2 #1 Billboard hits, Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter, and I'm Henry VIII, I Am, Hermans Hermits was quintessentially 60s. Led by former soap opera actor Peter Noone, the Manchester, England-born rock quartet who, on the heels of Beatlemania, made a big splash on the American charts as part of the British invasion. Harvey Lisberg discovered them and signed on as their manager. He sent a plane ticket to London record producer Mickey Most so that he could fly to see the band play in Bolton. Most, already successful with the Animals, became the group's producer and controlled the band's output. He emphasized a simple and non-threatening, clean-cut image. And while they've drifted into relative obscurity when you consider the other bands in that group, the Rolling Stones, The Who, and the Kinks, to name a few, the Hermans are actually still around and touring. The proof's in their vintage website. Number 9, The Rascals. They had the hits, but did they get the recognition they deserved? As successful as it was under the radar, New Jersey's The Rascals had multiple hit singles, including the infectious #1 hits Good Lovin' and Groovin' before breaking up in the 1970s. A 2013 reunion run on Broadway produced by superfan Steven Van Zandt of the E Street Band and The Sopranos reminded the world of the Rascals, and we're here to do the same. The Rascals were widely regarded as the finest blue-eyed soul group of the 1960s, a statement that's accurate without fully defining their importance or the breadth of their abilities. At their best, the Rascals fused the soulful passion of R&B, the tough, swaggering sound of garage rock, the chops of a top-notch show band, and a sense of musical adventure that borrowed from pop, jazz, funk, gospel, and world music. Beginning as the Young Rascals, they were a band of brash upstarts from the East Coast who on their debut album merged rock and soul with a skill and feel that was revolutionary. And with 1967's Groovin', they expanded their range to embrace psychedelia and arty pop. As the group's music became more mature and exploratory, the name The Young Rascals became a thorn in their side. And in April 1968, they issued the single A Beautiful Morning, an artfully arranged exercise in soulful pop that was their first record credited to the Rascals, which would be their moniker from then on. Number 8, Manfred Man. Ever heard of a band that was just as much about brains as beats? Manfred Man was an English blues rock band named after their keyboardist. The London-based group had a string of hits in the 1960s, including 3 that went number 1 on the UK charts: 1964's Do-Wah Diddy Diddy, 1966's Pretty Flamingo, and 1968's The Mighty Quinn, which was penned by Bob Dylan. An R&B band that only played pop to get on the charts, Manfred Man ranked among the most adept British invasion acts in both styles. The fact that their range encompassed jazz as well as rhythm and blues, coupled with some elements of their appearance and presentation, co-founder keyboardist Manfred Mann's bearded, bespectacled presence, also made the Manfreds more of a thinking person's band than a cute, cuddly outfit like the Beatles or sexual provocateurs in the manner of the Rolling Stones. Yet their approach to R&B was as valid as that of the Stones, equally compelling and often more sophisticated. They charted an impressive number of singles from 1964 through 1969 and developed a large, loyal international fandom that lingers to this day. Number 7, The Fifth Dimension. Imagine a band that combined every sound of the 60s and then some. A true amalgam of all things 60s and some things not, this California combo combines soul, funk, rock, Motown, show tunes, and anything else that it felt like adding to the mix. In 1969, The Fifth Dimension released Aquarius, the number 1 single that would become the signature song for the wildly popular counterculture musical Hair. Formed as the Versatiles in late 1965, the group changed its name to The Fifth Dimension by 1966. The 5 original members were Lamont McLemore, Marilyn McCoo, Florence LaRue, Ronald Townsend, and Billy Davis Jr. Their earliest recordings were on the Soul City record label, which was started by recording artist Johnny Rivers. The group later recorded for Bell Arista Records, ABC Records, and Motown Records. Number 6, The Youngbloods. Could a folk rock band survive the changing tides of the 60s? Many a 50s coffeehouse act withered and died in the next decade. But this folk-rooted rock trio came into their own, first as a house band at New York's Cafe A Go-Go, then as a mainstream act with the Billboard hit Get Together. The Youngbloods could not be considered a major 60s band, but they were capable of offering some mighty pleasurable folk rock in the late 60s and produced a few great tunes along the way. One of the better groups to emerge from the East Coast in the mid-60s, they would temper their blues and jug band influences with gentle California psychedelia, particularly after they moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. While Young was always the focal point of the band, their first 2 albums also had songwriting contributions from guitarist Jerry Corbett. Produced by Felix Papalidari, who also worked with Cream, these records, The Youngbloods and Earth Music, were engaging and mature, if inconsistent, folk rock. Corbett's Grizzly Bear was a small hit, as was Get Together, a Dino Valenti song that had previously been recorded by Jefferson Airplane. The Youngbloods' slow, soulful interpretation of Get Together was definitive, but it wouldn't reach the top 10 until it was released in 1969 after the song had been used in a television public service ad. Number 5. The Shadows. Before the Beatles, there was another band dominating the British charts. Curious? The group, more known as the backing band to Cliff Richard, England's answer to Elvis, were successful in their own right, charting 4 #1 EPs. Their instrumental single, Apache, spent 5 weeks at #1 and had bedroom guitarists around the world trying to master their surf rock licks. The Shadows, originally known as the Drifters between 1958 and 1959, were an English instrumental rock group who dominated the British popular music charts in the pre-Beatles era from the late 1950s to the early 1960s. The group's trademark was the smooth, twangy sound produced by lead guitarist Marvin's lavish use of the tremolo arm of his Fender Stratocaster, an effect that could be made to sound either lyrical or sinister. As the primitive charm of the skiffle era faded, the Shadows showed a generation of embryonic British rockers what to do. Thousands learned to play guitar by imitating the Shadows' hits, which included Apache, FBI, and Wonderful Land. Many went on to buy their own Stratocasters as the British beat boom took off. The era of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones made the Shadows' music obsolete, and the group officially disbanded in 1968. Number 4. Procol Harum. One song, 10 million copies sold, yet few remember the band behind it. We had never heard of them either, but we've certainly heard A Whiter Shade of Pale, one of only a handful of singles to sell 10 million copies. 5 decades and many incarnations later, Procol Harum is still touring. Procol Harum were an English rock band formed in Southend-on-Sea, Essex in 1967. Although noted for their Baroque and classical influence, Procol Harum's music is described as psychedelic rock and proto-prog with hints of the blues, R&B, and soul. In 2018, the band was honored by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when A Whiter Shade of Pale was inducted into the new singles category. They were previously nominated as performers in 2012. Number 3. Dave Clark 5. Could they really have been bigger than the Beatles, even for a moment? While not known as the quintessential British invasion group, the Dave Clark 5 appeared 18 times on The Ed Sullivan Show and sold 100 million records. Oh, and their #1 single, Glad All Over, knocked out I Wanna Hold Your Hand by those 4 mop tops from Liverpool. For a very brief time in 1964, it seemed that the biggest challenger to the Beatles phenomenon was the Dave Clark 5. From the Tottenham area of London, the quintet had the fortune to knock I Wanna Hold Your Hand off the top of the British music charts with Glad All Over, and were championed for about 15 minutes by the British press as the Beatles' most serious threat. They were the first British invasion band to break in a big way in the States after the Beatles, though the Rolling Stones and others quickly supplanted the DC-5 as the Fab Four's most serious rivals. The Dave Clark 5 reached the top 40 17 times between 1964 and 1967, with memorable hits like Glad All Over, Bits and Pieces, Because, and a remake of Bobby Days Over and Over, as well as making more appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show than any other English act. The DC-5 were distinguished from their British contemporaries by their larger-than-life production, Clark's loud stomping drum sound, and Mike Smith's leathery vocals. Though accused by detractors of lacking finesse and hipness, they had a solid ear for melodies and harmonies and wrote much of their early material, the best of which endured quite well. Interestingly and unusually for that era, band leader Dave Clark managed and produced the band himself, negotiating a much higher royalty rate than artists of that period usually received. After a couple of years of superstardom, the group proved unable to either keep up with the changing times or maintain a high standard of original compositions and called it quits in 1970. Number 2. The Kingsmen. One hit song, but its influence? Massive. Let's dive in. You may not recall this ever-gigging party band by name, but you certainly know their indiscernible yet ever-listenable smash hit, Louie Louie, a Richard, not Chuck, Berry cover. After hitting the airwaves in 1963, the song, which is required learning material for every garage rock band, maintains a presence on classic rock and oldies radio stations to this day. The Kingsmen and Louie Louie are true legends of rock and roll music. Worldwide, scores of millions of people recognize the opening strains of the hit song Louie Louie the instant they hear them. People of all ages and backgrounds break into smiles the moment that primal riff first tickles their ears. On a multitude of levels, Louie Louie has embedded itself deep within our collective consciousness and has become a permanent element of our culture. Yet few know the true story behind this legendary recording and its aftermath. The Kingsmen's 1964 follow-up to Louie Louie was a party version of Money, That's What I Want, which hit the Billboard Hot 100 at number 16 and on Cashbox at number 17. Then came Little Latin Lupe Lu, peaking on Billboard at number 46 and Cashbox at number 49. After that, it was Death of an Angel, number 33 on Cashbox and number 42 on Billboard. In 1966, the Kingsmen continued to hit the charts with Killer Joe reaching number 77 on Billboard and number 81 on Cashbox. Their original recording of Louie Louie was re-released as Louie Louie 64, 65, 66 and re-entered the Billboard, Cashbox, and Record World charts. They also released a promotional item, a picture sleeve-clad potato chip ad jingle 45 titled The Crunch, their only picture sleeve single which did not chart. In 1967, they made the charts for the last time with Bo Diddley Bach, reaching number 128 on Billboard. And in July, founding member Lynn Easton left the group. Number 1. The Archies. Imagine topping the charts without ever performing live. Sounds impossible, right? Not for the Archies. Yes, those Archies. The ones in the comic books, the cartoons, and then, in 1969, the band, whose sticky sweet hit Sugar Sugar is the defining tune of the bubblegum pop genre. The song topped the charts in the US and around the world, making the Archies the first fictitious band to hit number 1 and the only group to do so without ever performing live, according to NPR. Like so many 60s acts, however, their brightest Technicolor success began to dim in the 70s, and when they resurfaced decades later with a Christmas album, it failed to chart. The Archies were created by promoter Don Kirshner, who was coming off a major success as the creator of the Monkees. In late 1967, Kirshner was hired as music supervisor for CBS's new Saturday morning cartoon, The Archie Show, which was to feature a new original song every week. He immediately brought on producer Jeff Berry. Kirshner's original choice for lead singer was Kenny Karen, but Berry brought in Ron Dante, an experienced session singer who'd fronted the detergent's novelty parody, Leader of the Laundromat. Dante had met Berry at a Neil Diamond session and had previously cut promos for Kirshner. Dante won the job, and Berry hired Jeannie Thomas as the group's female vocalist. When the TV show debuted, it was a hit, and the first Archies single, Bang Shang-a-Lang, nearly made the top 20 in late 1968. Thanks for tuning in. If you loved this trip down memory lane, hit that like button and subscribe for more music history deep dives. Drop a comment with your favorite 60s band, and we'll see you in the next video.